The council chamber had grown colder since Charon burned. The sweeping architecture of polished stone and hovering platforms still shimmered with grandeur, but the atmosphere had curdled. Gone was the quiet awe of diplomacy. In its place, skepticism, whispering cabals, and the subtle tremor of alliances being unstitched thread by thread. Vera Kael stood at the center of it all, poised on the central speaking platform, back straight, eyes unflinching. Her voice had just finished echoing across the hall, the last words of her report still settling into silence like falling dust. Charon is no more. Our coalition forces held formation, struck with precision and made clear the cost of war. A beat of silence followed, then the scoff. It came from Councillor Dren of the Vale, a crystalline being of light and angles, seated high along the upper tier. His voice rang with icy indifference. A depot destroyed. Impressive, I'm sure. But how many of your ships did not return, Ambassador Kael? How many allies now doubt this? Alliance. Vera didn't blink. Enough to remind us what's at stake, not enough to forget why we fight. Council murmurs rose around her, some supporting, some sharpening their knives. A delegate from the Ovari leaned forward, their feathery fronds twitching. What assurances can you give us, Ambassador, that humanity will not drag us into a war we cannot win? Vera turned her head slightly, hands folded in front of her. She didn't raise her voice, she never needed to. No one is dragged into anything. You stood with us at the Accord. You signed the Charter, and now the time has come to honor it. The murmuring deepened, darker this time. Then, from a far corner of the chamber, another delegate rose, Ambassador Kevril of the Renari. His tone was carefully neutral, yet every word was laced with implication. Some among us, Kevril said, have begun talks with other powers. As a precaution, should the humans falter, we must consider alternatives. Vera's gaze hardened. You mean the coalition? He spread his hands. We mean survival. A silence more dangerous than shouting settled across the chamber. Vera's datapad buzzed once, a silent alert, a message from an encrypted channel. Kael, one of the Border World factions, has requested a closed negotiation with the coalition. Draven and Vale may need to intervene. She dismissed it with a flick of her finger. Not now, but her eyes returned to Kevril, sharper now. Make your choice, Renari, but do not mistake silence for consent. If you align with those who burned Epsilon Prime, the galaxy will remember. So will we. The chamber stirred again, but this time quieter, heavier. Kevril sat back, his expression unreadable. Vera gave a brief nod to the council floor, turned, and stepped away from the center platform. As she exited, her aide hurried to her side, an anxious young Zorth analyst named Talvin. Ambassador, he whispered, should I prepare a public rebuttal? No, she replied, brushing past shimmering holograms and flickering galactic charts. I'll prepare something better. Talvin blinked. What's that? She glanced over her shoulder, her amber eyes cold. An answer. The tactical chamber aboard the Vale was dim, pulsing faint blue with encrypted transmissions. Thin lines of light traced planetary systems and fleet paths across the holomap. In the center stood Commander Rowan Vale, arms crossed, brows furrowed, studying a rotating model of Syndralis 4, a temperate border world straddling neutral space. She didn't like the shape of it. Too many blind canyons, too many neutral zones ripe for betrayal. A secure comm crackled to life beside her, flickering into the holographic image of Vera Kael, seated at her private quarters on the diplomatic vessel Unity's Promise. Her uniform was crisp, but her posture was strained. Behind her, shadows of movement. Aides, information runners, and quiet chaos. Commander Vale, Vera said without pleasantries. I'm authorizing a covert operation to intercept a diplomatic party from Syndralis 4. Intelligence suggests they're en route to a coalition rendezvous point. Rowan tilted her head. So the Renari weren't bluffing? No, Vera said, and they're not alone. This isn't defection yet, but if they cross into coalition space with envoys, it might be irreversible. Rowan's voice was steady. What are the rules of engagement? We need confirmation first. No unnecessary aggression, but if they are defecting, I want them held, quietly. No public incident. And if they're bait? Vera's eyes narrowed. Then I trust you to make the right call. The hologram shifted. A new signal blinked into view. Captain Draven Locke, live from the Resolute. The background glowed with red operational lights and quiet methodical motion. Her expression was colder than usual. I've reviewed the briefing. Draven said. "We'll run a silent flank outside the Syndralis system. No one enters or leaves without us seeing it." "You'll have limited support," Vera warned. "No council authorization, no reinforcements. This doesn't exist unless you succeed." Rowan smirked faintly. "Wouldn't be the first time." Draven didn't return it. "I'm not sending another ship into a trap without knowing the terrain. I want a recon sweep before Vale touches down." "Approved," Vera said. "But time's short. They make contact in less than 48 hours. Rowan nodded, shifting her gaze back to the Syndralis map. "Any idea what they're offering the Coalition?" "Nothing official," Vera replied. "But if I were Zareth Vox, I'd be after their hypersilk fields. Resource-rich, hidden mines, enough for weapons manufacturing, enough to shift the balance." Draven's jaw tightened. "Then we stop it cold." Vera glanced towards someone off-screen, then back to them. "I have to return to session. One last thing. This operation has complications." Rowan raised a brow. "Such as?" Vera hesitated. "There's reason to believe someone inside the Alliance passed details of this meeting to the Coalition." The room fell still. Draven leaned forward slightly. "You're saying we have a mole?" "I'm saying," Vera replied, "if the Coalition is waiting, they'll know you're coming, and they'll be ready." She paused. "Watch each other's backs. Trust no one else." The feed cut out. Rowan let out a breath and cracked her neck. Just another day in paradise. Draven nodded once. "Gear up. We launch in 4 hours." As the holomap reoriented itself around Syndralis 4, both commanders stared into its soft glow, silent, calculating. A mission no one could know about, a betrayal no one could prove, and a clock already ticking down. The Council's outer chambers were quieter than the main floor, but not calmer. Here, diplomacy slithered through shadows. Conversations happened in partial glances and unfinished sentences. It was a place where alliances were not forged but sharpened, where words were weapons and silence a trap. Vera Kael moved through the polished halls of the chamber's diplomatic wing, her boots clicking softly against the obsidian floor. The ceiling arched overhead in graceful curves of etched glass and gold-veined metal, meant to inspire awe. It only reminded her how fragile all of this really was. She was on her third corridor when Ambassador Kivril intercepted her, his long, coiled robes trailing behind him like smoke. His face, smooth and angular, betrayed nothing but faint amusement. "You've been quiet, Vera," Kivril said, falling into step beside her. "I expected more fire from the woman who sent a fleet into Coalition space without permission." Vera didn't break stride. "That fire's been redirected toward those who need burning." Kivril offered a dry smile. "Then you'll want to keep your torch ready. Rumor says the Concord of Syndralis has already passed a vote." Vera stopped. "Did they?" He shrugged. "Unofficially, but a delegation has left the planet. And if the Coalition meets them first..." She turned to face him. "You know what happens if they defect." "I do." Kevril's eyes were calculating. "And perhaps that is why I suggest discretion. You can't save the entire galaxy with speeches and saber-rattling. Some things must be let go." Vera leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "That station we destroyed? That wasn't saber-rattling. That was the sound of the galaxy waking up." She stepped past him and continued down the hall. Minutes later, inside her private diplomatic suite, Vera locked the door and activated a secure privacy field. Her aide, Talvin, stood near the wall monitor, running diplomatic encryption scans. "Report," she said. "There's movement." Talvin replied, bringing up a rotating display of internal council messages. "One of our secure channels was accessed using an outdated encryption key, one that was supposed to be retired after the Charon strike." Vera moved closer. "Where was it used?" He hesitated. "From a terminal aboard the Unity's Promise. Your ship." Her fingers curled slightly. "Who has access?" "Only senior staff, and someone with your authorization codes." Vera stared at the data for a moment, then whispered, "Someone's feeding the Coalition. From inside." Talvin's voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you think it's Kivril?" "No," she said coldly. "Kivril is many things, but not subtle. He'd poison the well in public and drink first, just to prove he could." She turned to her desk and keyed in a deep-layer surveillance request, one so buried in protocol that even Talvin couldn't see the results. "I need to know who on my staff isn't mine," she said. "And what if we find them?" he asked. Her reply came without hesitation. "Then they disappear." The dropship tore through the violet sky of Syndralis 4, its hull streaked with turbulence and the sharp glint of sun off hypersilk fields far below. From the cockpit, the landscape was breathtaking. Sweeping canyons, glowing groves, and the faint shimmer of the planet's mineral-rich atmosphere. But Rowan Vale wasn't here for beauty. She stood just behind the pilot, armor-sealed and matte black under her tactical cloak. Her helmet rested under one arm, her other hand gripping the overhead rail as the ship rattled through the descent corridor. "ETA 4 minutes," called the pilot. "Approach zone is clear. No coalition signatures." Rowan's jaw tightened. That doesn't mean they're not down there. Behind her, her strike team ran final checks. 6 soldiers, 2 Terran Marines, 1 Plerex stealth operative, and a trio of Zorth scouts trained in energy sabotage. All good people. All about to be tested. "Remember the plan," Rowan said over the team channel. "We touch down. We split into 2 fire teams. Objective is the Concord Envoy's outpost. They left in a hurry. We get confirmation on who they met, secure evidence, and get out before we're noticed. Or before someone decides we shouldn't leave," muttered Sergeant Keel. The ship's belly rumbled as it passed through a thermal cross-current, kicking a gust of violet haze across the viewport. The pilot adjusted their course, then gave a sharp nod. "Touchdown in 15 seconds. We've got cover from fog drift. Good luck, Commander." Rowan pulled her helmet on, the HUD blinking to life in an instant. The dropship landed on a narrow ridge nestled just above the singing groves. As the hatch opened, wind and eerie harmonics from the spirewood trees spilled inside, high, crystalline tones like whispers through glass. "Go," Rowan ordered. The team deployed in 2 squads, moving fast but silent across moss-covered rock. The outpost wasn't far, just down a shallow slope toward a cluster of stone and metal structures built into the ravine wall. That's when it all went wrong. The first shot came from above, a precision bolt that took out one of the Zorth scouts mid-step. No warning, no time to react. The body tumbled into the ravine, vanishing into mist. "Ambush!" someone shouted. Energy blasts lit up the grove in every direction, red beams cutting through fog like laser-threaded needles. Coalition strike units emerged from camouflaged positions, perfectly placed, perfectly timed. "They were waiting for us," Keel shouted as he returned fire. Rowan dove behind a half-collapsed tree, rolling into cover and scanning the ridge. Her HUD lit with hostiles, too many for a simple guard patrol. "Fall back to the ridge! Get us high ground!" she barked. 2 more soldiers went down, 1 Plerex and a Terran Marine, before the rest could regroup behind a narrow outcrop. The enemy pressed in, disciplined and relentless. Their armor bore no insignia, their movements too clean to be mercenaries. "These are Coalition special operatives," Rowan muttered. "They knew the drop zone, knew the plan." Keel swore beside her. "Then someone sold us out." Rowan's reply was a burst of suppressive fire, driving their attackers back just long enough to trigger a smoke screen. "Pilot, we need exfil now." "We're pinned by anti-air," came the reply. "You'll have to move to the secondary extraction site, 3 clicks northeast." "Copy that. We'll run it." She looked to Keel. "You with me?" He reloaded. "To hell and back." They moved through the mist, dodging fire, laying charges to collapse the path behind them. Every step was survival by inches. Every breath came with smoke, sweat, and blood. By the time they reached the fallback point, only 4 remained. Aboard the evac shuttle, Rowan slumped against the bulkhead, helmet off, dirt and blood streaking her face. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Someone knew. Someone warned the enemy. And now they were bleeding for it. Space around Syndralis 4 was supposed to be quiet. Low patrol traffic, sparse satellites, no active defense grid. It was a lie. Captain Draven Locke stood at the center of the Resolute's bridge, the low red glow of alert status painting her face in stark shadow. Her fingers gripped the edge of the command console as new coalition signals flashed across the tactical display. 1, 2, 6 vessels, 2 destroyers, 1 carrier, 3 fast attack corvettes. "Where did they come from?" she asked, voice like steel cooling under pressure. Lieutenant Alvarez shook his head. "No sign on long-range scans. They must have been using shadow skip drives, popped out of blind space along our orbital flank." Draven's jaw tensed. They were waiting. Commander Harris stepped beside her, brow furrowed. "We don't have the mass to fight that carrier head-on, and if they vector toward Rowan's evac corridor..." "They won't reach it," Draven said. We hold here. Alvarez hesitated. Captain, if we commit to this fight, we lose the Vigilant. Their engines haven't cleared the red zone. Draven turned to the viewport, where the Vigilant, a smaller Terran frigate with evac escort duty, hung in position, struggling to break orbit. She knew the crew, knew the names, but she knew the mission better. All ships, she ordered, voice calm, unshakable, fall back and regroup around the Resolute. Prepare layered formation. We draw the coalition fire. Harris flinched. You're putting us between them and the fleet. That's exactly where we need to be. The Resolute turned sharply, engines flaring. Her armor was scarred from Charon, her hull running on patched circuitry and backup relays, but she still had bite. The guns roared to life, firing the opening salvo into the coalition corvettes. A moment later, fire returned, plasma bolts hammering into the Resolute's port side. The ship rocked hard. Warning lights blared across the bridge. Shields at 42%, hull breach on deck 5. Alvarez shouted. Divert emergency power to magnetic plating, Draven replied. Seal the breach. Helm, rotate the forward array and bring the spinal cannon online. Another blast struck the ship, shattering one of the sensor fins. The deck shook. Somewhere below, systems failed. Fires sparked. Spinal cannon charging, Harris said through gritted teeth. On the display, the coalition destroyer was closing. Its guns flared, one more volley and the Vigilant would never leave orbit. Now, Draven said, the Resolute fired. The spinal cannon ignited in a streak of pale blue energy, punching through the void like a spear. The destroyer's shields flared, collapsed, and then the beam punched through its forward hull, detonating its command deck in a flash of debris and fire. The crew let out short-lived cheers, but Draven raised her hand. Focus. The carrier's still inbound. Alvarez checked sensors. They're recalling fighters. Looks like they're backing off. Draven stared at the screen for a long moment. No, she said quietly. They're repositioning. This wasn't about winning. What was it about then? Harris asked. She turned to him, eyes flat, expression unreadable. It was about testing us, gauging how far we'd go and what we'd sacrifice. She didn't mention the Vigilant, now safe, but missing 2 escort craft, or the 2 Terran ships she'd left behind to slow the enemy, now gone. Choices she made, choices she'd make again. But she also saw the fracture in Harris's face, not distrust, not yet, but doubt, and that was a wound harder to patch than any hull. The war room aboard the hidden Alliance station was silent, save for the faint hum of holographic data arrays and the occasional flicker of static across a tactical display. The lights were dimmed, the air thick with smoke from overloaded systems still under repair. It smelled of ozone, scorched metal, and sleepless hours. Vera Kael stood at the central table, arms folded, amber eyes fixed on a rotating 3D model of Syndralis 4 and its surrounding orbital data. Her hair was tied back tight, her diplomat's uniform freshly pressed but missing its usual shine. She looked like she hadn't sat down in a day. And she hadn't. Draven Locke entered first. She walked in slow, measured steps, no formal greeting. Her uniform jacket hung open over a dark field shirt, sleeves rolled, streaks of soot and engine grease still clinging to her collar. Her expression was unreadable, but her jaw was tight. Rowan Vale followed a few moments later, limping slightly, a field dressing across her thigh. One side of her armor was dented and splattered in dried mud and plasma soot. Her voice broke the silence. You were right, Rowan said, pulling a damaged datapad from her belt. The Concord delegation made contact. The coalition was already on the ground when we arrived. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a handover. Vera stepped forward, taking the datapad. Do we have evidence? Rowan nodded. We pulled encrypted fragments off their signal relay. Not enough for public proof, but enough to know someone fed them our op. Draven approached the table. We lost 3 ships. 4 if you count the Vigilance escorts. Whoever's feeding intel to the coalition isn't just sabotaging us. They're bleeding us out. Silence returned. It felt heavier this time. Vera turned, opening a private secure channel on the table. A projection of her staff logs appeared. She isolated a name, one of her personal aides, and deleted it. Rowan raised an eyebrow. You sure? No, Vera said, but I can't afford to wait for certainty. Not anymore. Draven looked between them. This isn't just a leak, it's coordinated. They're trying to split us. Rowan's tone sharpened. Then maybe it's time we start doing the same. If we know which worlds are leaning toward defection, maybe it's time we start applying pressure. Vera didn't blink. What kind of pressure? The kind they remember, Rowan said coldly. Draven's voice cut through like a blade. No. Rowan turned to her. Why not? Because once we start turning our guns on former allies, Draven said, we stop being a coalition and start becoming tyrants. You'd let them walk to the coalition with our secrets? I'd rather stop them before they take the first step. Their eyes locked, neither giving ground. Vera stepped between them, raising a hand. We're not enemies, she said. Not yet. She looked at both of them. But we are being watched, tested. The coalition is waiting for us to fracture. That's the next phase. Divide us, then devour us. She closed the interface. So we don't give them that fracture. We find the next defector before they move. We close the leak, and we make sure when this war is over, the Alliance still looks like something worth saving. The three women stood in that circle of low light and fading projections, leaders, survivors. Their shoulders bore different burdens, but the war had bound them all, not just by cause, but by consequence. In the cold quiet of space, the Alliance repair station drifted like a wounded sentinel, its hull darkened, its outer decks lined with ships in various states of ruin and rebirth. The stars beyond it shimmered softly, indifferent to the pain of those below. Inside, life moved again, but slower, quieter. The kind of calm that follows a storm but never promises peace. In a private corridor near the command deck, Draven Locke walked alone. She'd dismissed her escort. She wanted silence. Her uniform was clean but heavy on her shoulders, her thoughts heavier. She passed engineers and officers who stood a little straighter when they saw her, but she didn't acknowledge them. Her eyes were far away, far from the mission, far from the ship. Maybe still back in orbit, watching the Vigilance escorts burn. At the far end of the hall, she stopped before a wide viewport. The stars stared back. Behind her, footsteps. Rowan Vale leaned against the bulkhead, arms folded, one leg still bandaged from the ambush. Thought you might be here. Draven didn't look at her. You came to argue? Rowan shook her head. No, I came to say we can't let this slide. We can't fight blind. Someone fed the coalition our entire plan. I know, Draven said quietly, and I know what it cost. Rowan stepped beside her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Rowan said, You ever wonder what we'll look like when this is over? If we'll even recognize ourselves? Draven's voice was cold steel wrapped in fatigue. If we don't win, we won't have to worry about that. Elsewhere, in a low-lit council chamber on a different deck, Vera Kael stood behind a podium as representatives filed in for a closed vote. She watched them enter with the calm of a veteran chess player studying the board. Some nodded to her, some didn't. It didn't matter, because she knew now one of them had already chosen a side. And they weren't voting with conscience. They were voting with fear. Hours later, in the depths of the station, a dim storage alcove flickered with intermittent power. A figure sat at a console, face obscured, wrapped in utility cloth, hands gloved. They inserted a small, cracked data crystal. The console lit with crimson code. No fanfare, no signal flare, just a quiet transmission bouncing off encrypted relays into the dark corners of space. A final message. Phase 1, complete.